How you doing, everybody? It's your guy Wardy here. It's May 19th, 2025, and we have a plethora of topics to get into for our latest Big Mets update segment. But in case you guys didn't check out last night's post-game coverage, please make sure to do so. We have it not only on video, but also on audio as well, wherever you get your audio podcasts there, as we broke down the latest deflating loss, a series loss against the New York Yankees by a final score of 8-2. All the details, all the reactions, and everything in between is what we broke down, because today, folks, we have to take a look ahead as to what is the next matchup for the Mets now. And this is another big series, this time in Boston against the Red Sox. We're going to preview that series before wrapping up the show here. We have a big announcement before we even get there. But folks, let's also talk about, let's begin the show by getting into what has worked so terribly for the Mets as of late, and that is their infield defense. How can they rectify this? How can Carlos Mendoza make things better? Well, the full expectation now is that Brett Baty will in fact be getting more consistent reps at third base. We're going to break down the numbers to explain exactly why that is, where Mark Vientos fits in this Mets roster going forward for the remainder of the year, and ultimately, what are the Mets going to do with their continued lack of approach with runners in scoring position? Juan Soto isn't hitting a lick. Everybody and their mother feels like they're not hitting a lick there. What can the Mets do to rectify things there before they get worse than what they've already been to this point in the season? Even for a team 10 plus games above 500, we all have seen with the eye test and with the numbers to suggest that this Mets team is a bottom feeder when it matters most in the clutch. How can they change that? That's what we're going to break down, as well as what's going on with guys like Mauricio and everyone else in the farm. From Port St. Lucie all the way up there to AAA Syracuse, we're going to give you guys the latest farm report, as there's some key notes on Mauricio, who looked brilliant in his first game of the year there in Syracuse after being moved up from the Rummel Ponies. Jet Williams continues to look like an absolute stud, not long before he will get moved up to Syracuse shortly, and everything else in Mets land is what we're about to highlight. So thank you guys again kindly for smashing the like and subscribe button as you first chime in, and let me know all your initial reactions in the comments down below to the following topics today. And of course, shout out to our amazing sponsor that many of you guys know well here on the platform, that being our great friends at BetUS, that have you covered with all of your sports betting needs. First, folks, if you are not interested in sports betting, please don't bother here. This is only for my respective sports bettors that not only know how to dabble, but are going to make sure they do it responsibly. And if you do fall in that category, head over to betus.com.pa today and utilize our promo code YouTube150. That way, YouTube will get a 150% signing bonus on your first deposit, $150 on your second and your third, up to $2,000 for whatever you guys want to bet on. And as you guys can see right here, Luis Robert has been the talk of the town on the trade rumor front for the Mets this past week. And as you guys can see, chance to win for the Mets to win the whole thing this year is at plus 900 currently. Can Robert be that X factor? I'm not exactly sure, but I do think that he could be an added piece to the puzzle by the deadline. Should make sense for the Mets and their outfield configuration, depending on guys like Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor. So if you guys want to play a play like this, by all means go ahead. If you guys want to check out all the other Mets related props, plays, lines, you name it, or baseball in general, or sports in general, head over to betus.com.pa today. But now, guys, let's get into this, and let me hear again the comments down below. What has been the most frustrating thing in Mets land the past 2+ weeks at minimum? It has been twofold. It has been a lack of hitting runners in scoring position, no question about it, but it's also been the Mets' complete lack of fundamental baseball. This has really hurt them, not only with situational hitting with runners in scoring position, but also certainly, and to a greater amount than anything, I think we could rightfully argue, the lack of defensive upside. Between both Francisco Lindor and Mark Vientos, there is a glaring hole right now on the left side of the infield over the past couple weeks, something that I don't expect to stay the same there with Lindor, because he has a track record to tell you that won't be the case. But Lindor already has 7 errors this season. He only had around 12 last year, so he's well on his way to have his worst defensive season statistically for the Mets since arriving here back to begin the 2021 season. Now, I love Lindor, and I have the utmost confidence that he's a guy that we can continue to rely on shortstop. But if I'm being quite frank, if there's one man that I don't have the utmost confidence in, not on the offensive end, because I don't have much worries there, but it really is on the defensive end, and this gives shades of J.D. Davis when he was battling out with Todd Frazier like it was yesterday, where you have a great hot bat at third base, but you just don't have the consistency defensively. I present to you, yes, Mark Vientos. In case you guys are thinking, okay, you know, Mark's defense hasn't been great, but maybe it's overblown. And I really wish that was the case as someone who loves Vientos, loves the Vientos family, and wants to advocate for him to play at that premier hot corner position throughout the entire course of the season. The big problem problem that we have, though, everybody, is that Mark Vientos has not only been a liability at third base, but he has been far and away the worst defensive third baseman in all Major League Baseball. If we take a look at his baseball savant numbers, they are not pretty, to say the least. They're all in the blue for the most part, especially on the offensive end, so he has a lot more work to do this season to find more consistency in his game. But Vientos also has heated up quite a bit. Up until this past number of games, he was batting over 300 for the previous 20-plus games. So he was getting on base a good clip 1, 2, 3 times a night there, especially hitting up the middle opposite field. Vientos has done a really good job at spreading the ball to all fields this year. We just want to see more of that untapped power for a guy who had 27 home runs and just over 100 games or so last season. But this year, everybody, Mark Vientos has been absolutely abysmal when it comes to defensive upside at third base. He's in the 1 percentile in outs above average at the hot corner, meaning that he's quite literally statistically the worst third baseman in all Major League Baseball. And just to show you guys the contrast between himself and Brett Baty is currently in the 71st percentile in outs above average, all while playing not just third base, but second base, and he's been utilized all over the infield. So while not even playing just one position, Brett Baty has been proficient defensively and has been amongst the top 30% in all Major League Baseball among infield defenders. In the case of Mark Vientos, he's at the very, 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 very bottom of that list, and given the fact that Mark's offense has not necessarily been enough to prevail and to pick up the slack on the defensive end night by night, the way that he did so brilliantly last season. You know, if there's one thing we could say about Mark Vientos in the 2024 season, it wasn't just an electric bat that was so clutch for the Mets at times when they need it most, when other guys weren't stepping up, especially in the first half when he got caught up and had that huge game-winning bomb walk-off against the Cardinals. I remember it like it was yesterday. It's kind of crazy how much has changed since then. And in the case of Vientos, the bat's ball skills is still there, so it's not overly worrying. But when you're not necessarily laying the world on fire the way that you were for pretty much the vast majority of the year last year, naturally your defensive woes are going to stick out like a sore thumb. And Vientos did a brilliant job down the stretch last year in postseason play, where even when he had costly errors in games, pretty much every game they had a costly error, he made up for it with key hitting, including home runs. So Vientos has been able to pick up the slack in the past in high-pressure cooker situations. I have the confidence that he can do it again, but I have the utmost confidence that in order for Mark Vientos to get the best out of himself offensively and for the Mets to maximize their both offensive and defensive product, they have to shift Mark to DH, and not necessarily a full-time role, but definitely getting more consistent reps at DH right now. While yes, it will hinder his defensive development, but the counter is the Mets are in a win-now stage right now, and they're not in a position to just allow a net negative defender at the hot corner, a premier position, to be a liability and cost the Mets runs the way that he did yet again this past day to begin the Subway Series. If it wasn't for Vientos, only one of those runs scored there, and it was one earned run and 2 unearned runs initially charged there to David Pearson. What was otherwise a fantastic final line from going toe-to-toe against a dominant southpaw, and Max Fried had a better technical day than him, but they both had 2 runs charged on them, 1 earned, 1 unearned. And that was because, again, of the Mark Vientos defensive blunder to begin that ball game. Now, I know a lot of Mets fans have been nitpicking Mark Vientos' defense since the start. And I've fallen out in that category as well at times, going back a couple years, because, again, the big question with Mark has not really been the offense, but rather, can he be a sustainable, at least decent third baseman at the major league level? And what discourages me most about the start to the season for Mark, but also encouraged at the same time knowing it can get better, is what we saw last season was not nearly as much of a liability. Say what you will about Vientos in the playoffs last year defensively, but throughout the regular season, with the exception of like 1 or 2 bad games against the Angels, where even Lindor had defensive hiccups there on that road trip after the trade deadline in post-August of 2024, Vientos was pretty much nails when called upon at third base and was not the liability we otherwise thought he was going to be. And just to share an example, everybody, Mark Vientos wasn't fantastic defensively last year by any stretch, but he was at least a smidge better. And I say a smidge for a reason, because even as a bottom feeder defender last year, Vientos was still in the 6th percentile. This year he's in the 1 percentile, so he's managed to somehow regress from what was already very underwhelming defensive metrics. So now you bring in Brett Baty, who, yes, the bat-to-ball skills is not going to be the exact same. And yes, Carlos Mendoza is still stubborn on the mentality of Brett Baty cannot get a start against a left-handed pitcher, even though Brett Baty had one of the better splits against Fried, entering that start 2 for 6 in his career. Yet we didn't go with Baty. We went with Vientos. Nothing happened, and all we had was a defensive liability. So I hope that Carlos Mendoza has learned his lesson here, is going to start to give a little bit more of a leash to Baty, because at the end of the day, what is the point of having him on this roster if you're just going to utilize him in areas where he's not going to succeed? Because Brett Baty has proven his lack of consistent ability to be that guy off the bench there as an offensive weapon. Not that he can't hit in a pinch hitting situation, but he's still in the developmental stage of his career. And at the young age of 25 now, in a make or break season for Brett Baty, you have to say to yourself as a Mets fan, how are we going to be able to maximize his output and get things trending upward offensively? You know what? Baty was tearing the cover off the ball right before this series started, and you want to know what really changed? It was being sat back-to-back days after having 3 home runs in like a 24 to 48 hour span, all because Carlos Mendoza did not like the configuration facing lefty pitching. And that was the demise of the Mets, as they had a very underwhelming offensive series against the Pittsburgh Pirates, did not hit a lick yet again with runners in scoring position, and that was a continuation yet again heading into the biggest series that they've had yet this time, and the Bronx against the Yankees. You see the point I'm trying to make? We have seen the continued trends of what Mendoza has done right versus what he's done wrong, and there's one thing that we can nitpick as of late. It's that why sit your hot hand when they're clearly hot, regardless of the handedness? If they get absolutely exposed against lefty pitching, let them get exposed or two for a game. Then you can have a further validated reasoning as to why you're not going to put him in there. But the problem that I have right now with Carlos Mendoza's lack of proper utilization with Brett Baty is that you're not putting him in a position to actually succeed, and you're hindering the development of Mark Vientos too in the process. By having Vientos continue to have defensive blunders at third base, you're not only hurting his potential confidence. I'm not saying it's to a great degree, but I'm sure Mark would be the first to tell you in a conversation that obviously isn't happy to see that happen. He just wants to pick up the team right away, as a good teammate would want to do. But Baty's defense is so pronounced, and in my opinion, is the best defensive option outside of Lindor in this infield, because Acuna is great, but Acuna is not a guy you're really moving much outside of second base right now. Baty has been the most versatile and the most upside. I'm taking Baty at third base every day of the week over McNeil. McNeil has barely any third base reps in his career at third base, and he wasn't good at third base when he's been there for the most part. Baty has not only been good, but he's been proficient there. At second base, he hasn't been much of a liability either. So I have the trust in Brett Baty at minimum to produce the defensive upside that what we are looking for as Mets fans. So what does Carlos Mendoza need to do, and what can we expect him to do beginning as soon as tonight against the Boston Red Sox in that 3-game set? What you can expect more than likely is Brett Baty to get more hot corner defense at third base, Acuna and McNeil platooning at second base, with McNeil potentially getting outfield reps as well. Acuna did have an outfield rep a couple games ago that we saw as pretty much the 7th or 8th inning on there, getting center field reps for the first time, but I don't expect that to be consistent. I expect Acuna to get more reps at second base, and his bat has cooled off the past week plus, no doubt about it whatsoever, but he still makes an impact even with just his pinch running ability, or of course just getting on base or by a little infield dribbler, or whatever it's going to be. Acuna does make an impact in ways that very little other batters in this Mets current lineup find themselves doing. So I don't have a gripe with Acuna, nor do I have a gripe with McNeil, who had himself a really good game yesterday for the Mets. He was our lone offensive weapon when they dropped that one 8-2. So give Jeff his continued reps in left field and or center based on matchups, and maybe giving him come off the bench sometimes there based on matchup with Tyrone Taylor looking good. I'd say the matchup in center, whatever the case may be, I'm fine with it. But to get back to the moral of the story here, everybody, Baty at third, Vientos at DH, facing both righties and lefties. Miss me with the nonsense that Vientos has to only be a DH against a southpaw like a Garrett Crochet. That does not need to be the case, nor should that be the case. Vientos, I'm sorry, was he platoon last season facing righty and lefty pitchers? No. When he was starting, has been starting every day at the hot corner, he's been facing all types of handedness. That should not deviate or change, because there is nothing to justify that now with Starling Marte as your other right-hand option when Vientos is obviously the superior one between the two. And secondly, your lefty option platoon DH was Jesse Winker, but he's out for a bit with an oblique injury, and Brett Baty was the call-up as a corresponding move. So if Baty is the better defensive option, keep him in the infield and keep Vientos at DH while he's here. There's absolutely nothing, no reason whatsoever to justify Brett Baty not being the predominant third baseman right now just for his defensive upside alone, because he can actually save runs and not hurt the Mets and potentially cost them runs. And now Vientos there at third base where he can continue, at DH, where he can continue to thrive and work on his offensive game. Yes, can that be a gripe down the road this year? Should Baty really fall off offensively and you can't even play him, and then you have to go back with Bark at third base? Yes, that is a risk, and that is exactly why the Mets have not deviated too far away from Vientos getting consistent third base reps. But you'd have to imagine that's going to start to change soon, beginning as soon as potentially tonight against the Red Sox, because push comes to shove, and at some point you need to make a decision if you're Carlos Mendoza on what's best for this lineup, both offensively and defensively. So Mets fans, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. How do you feel about the Mark Vientos and Brett Baty debacle between the two? Because I understand Baty isn't lighting the world on fire offensively, but he's at a 225 average and a 728 OPS. For those that don't know, Brett Baty has a higher OPS right now than Mark Vientos. And the crazy thing, when you look at his baseball savant peripherals, his bat speed is elite. He's in like the 95th percentile right now. His barrel percentage is in the 80th plus percentile. His average exit velocity is in the 80th plus percentile. His expected slugging is in the 85th plus percentile, looks like. Hard hit percentage is in the 75th to 80th plus percentile. Yes, he's been swinging and missing at a solid rate right now, but we are actually seeing encouragement in Baty's offensive game to lift and drive baseballs and is still spread for all fields. All the more reason to say Brett Baty needs to be in the slab consistently right now. You have to ride the hot hand defensively, and hopefully that will balance things out on the offensive output with the Mets' continued lack of a proper approach with runners in scoring position, which brings us to our greater discussion here, everybody. As I wasn't just here to highlight Vientos and Baty, I got to talk about Juan Soto and the Mets collectively not hitting a lick with runners in scoring position. So let's start here with the runner in scoring position approach, everybody. We know it's been bad this season, but just how bad has it been? Well, as we know, everybody, the Mets have been one of the bottom feeders in all the National League and Major League Baseball. But what if I told you that the Mets are fifth worst in Major League Baseball right now with a collective team batting average of 220 that we see right now with runners in scoring position? And to add insult to injury, they are the third worst team in all the National League, only trailing, yes, the Colorado Rockies and the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm sorry, guys, that cannot be justified. If you are the New York Mets, who are still somehow 10 plus games above 500, in large part because your rotation carrying you without Manaea and without Montas, they've been that good still, all things considered. That's what's carried the weight here. It has not been the Mets' continued offensive upside. Because while they put guys on base at a great clip and they're making things happen fairly often, they also have been so underwhelming with runners in scoring position that they literally are in a bottom feeder class. And the next best team out of the National League that is with the Mets on team batting average with runners in scoring position is Arizona Diamondbacks at 22, which is notable just because the Diamondbacks here are in fact one of the better offensive teams in baseball. Like the Mets at least entered the Subway Series matchup as a top 6 offensive team in baseball with collective offensive numbers. But this is where things get important. This is where, when you understand the context of a team and their success, that's why we have not been overly impressed with the Mets so far this year, regardless of the fact that they're 10 plus games above 500. Now, if we look at their OPS plus, it is a little bit different. I will bear that in mind. For those that don't know what OPS plus is, it's pretty much the same as WRC plus. It's just the version that's utilized in Baseball Reference versus Fangraphs, weighted runs created plus, or OPS plus. Pretty much on a scale of 100, how good are you, above league average or below league average as a team or as an actual individual batter? And for the Mets right now, they're 22nd in baseball, so a little bit higher than the team batting average at 92, so they're still below league average right now, below the average at 100. So they have a lot more work to do in runners in scoring position, and in order for that to happen, they need to find production, and they need to start getting a little bit more creative with their lab configuration, because I'm not going to put too much gripe on Carlos Mendoza right now. It's not his fault when the core of the offense just doesn't produce, because he has to work with the roster that is given him the cards that are dealt his way at the end of the day. So we can't sit here and nitpick every single time the Mets don't hit a lick, because regardless of what configuration he does with the offense, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lead to success. They could still have the same struggles and the same woes that we've seen time and time again. Regardless of how good this team is on paper, they look no different than years past with runners in scoring position, the same exact nonsense. So how do we justify things to get better? How do we rectify things, rather? And that starts with Juan Soto, because Juan Soto has been a glaring liability with runners in scoring position for the Mets this season. And that's crazy to say for a guy who has over 820 OPS, not even batting 250 right now after a very underwhelming series against the Yankees. Yes, I get it. His on base is still around 400 or so. He's getting on base at a great clip. But listen, we can only handle getting on base at a great clip so long before we get the Daniel Vogelbach flashbacks. And I know that's crazy to say, but yes, we are at a point where it's May 19th, and we're getting more similarities with Juan Soto as a Daniel Vogelbach type approach than we are the Juan Soto that's supposed to tear covers off baseballs and continuously drive in runs for the Mets runners in scoring position. Soto was abysmal with the few offensive opportunities they had in this series outside of a simple single and then getting on base via walk like 4 or 5 times, however many times it was. But Soto has been a liability on the runner in scoring position front. He's not alone. It's not just him, but it starts with him, because when you're a $765 million man, we expect you to be the most important and most pivotal batter in those situations situations, and he has not been that. I can count on my hand still how many hits Juan Soto has with runners in scoring position this season. That is a major problem, everybody. Not that he has been in endless opportunities, but he has been batting absolutely putrid. Alonso obviously has cooled off a bit lately, but he has been far from the liability there. Lindor's cooled off a bit lately, but again, far from the liability. We know how much he can turn it on. Then when you look at the core, again, that 4 through 6 guys, that is what sticks out like a sore thumb. Between BrandonNYM, Mark Vientos, and DH, who's ever at DH, say Starling Marte, that needs to change. We need to stop this nonsense that just because you're a DH, you're going to go bat clean up for the Mets and Starling Marte. I get Marte had an opposite field double yesterday. I also don't care because it was a meaningless double at the end of the day. The Mets didn't do anything with it because they weren't able to drive him in. What I care about is consistency. And if that means that you need to move Marte down the order, then so be it. But the further counter is Marte should just be getting less playing time in general. Vientos should be getting the bulk of the starts at DH right now, because there's no reason really to justify otherwise not to. Marte, I honestly have a bit more confidence in coming off the bench and maybe giving the Mets a key hit. And let's be real, that's what his role was kind of supposed to be heading into the season. 4th, 5th outfielder type, platoon DH, and coming off the bench. There's no need to justify him getting continued starts at DH right now when Vientos is right there with higher offensive upside and more potential to actually drive and run. So for all those reasons, I want Vientos at DH, but I would prefer if Vientos is going to be at DH. I don't want him. It's really tough because when you get into 4 through 6, it's a coin flip as to what you want, because BrandonNYM has been productive, then he's been not productive. He's productive, then he's not productive. There hasn't been a consistency there. There's been no unison. So the 4 through 6 is as much of a toss-up as any when we look across Major League Baseball as to the Mets in particular, as to what they need to do with their situational approach there. But when we look at the lineup as a whole, everybody, 1 through 9, when you have guys like Alvarez, who have been very Jekyll and Hyde in their offense early on. Some games Alvarez looks great with his approach. Others, he looks like that this is his MLB debut there. So we're still in the frustration level with Alvarez as to the consistency. He hasn't been terrible, but not great either. Torrens, we know, can be nails, but he's not going to be perfect every time either, and I'm curious to see how much Torrens is utilized in this 3-game set against the Boston Red Sox. Needless to say, not just Juan Soto, but it starts with Juan Soto. The Mets need to get the ball rolling with runners in scoring position, because the longer that they wait, the longer that they continue to be abysmal, the longer that they fall in a class with the Colorado Rockies and the Pittsburgh Pirates, they're going to lose out of first place. They're only up in first by a half game. If they lose tonight, the Phillies win, already we're out of first place, just like that. So not that being in first all year long is priority, but if you're the Mets and if you have the sizable lead that you did, you are just allowing everything to be taken away from you for no good reason. The Mets have beat themselves more often than not in the games that they've lost this year. Even yesterday's game against the Yankees are a very good team. I'm going to give them credit. It's not like Max Fried isn't a stud. It's not like Cody Bellinger wasn't unbelievably hot, because all those things were true. But at the same time, when you have 5 to 6 unearned runs and 2 costly errors, of course, and north of 8 walks, of course it's going to fall more on the Mets for their lack of proper approach and their lack of situational heading, their lack of proper defense, and their lack of just commanding the effing strike zone there, because everyone, their mother, has to walk everybody. Pearson walked 4, and the bullpen was horrendous. Stanek couldn't get the job done. Cabrera became batting practice lefty for Bellinger. I digress. So the point is, everybody, this team is far from perfect. Don't let their record fool you. And I'm not saying to not be an optimist, because I absolutely am. I'm really excited for the course of the 162 year, all the highs, all the lows, and everything that comes in between. But this has been the commonality and a glaring hole, the biggest Achilles heel for the Mets far and away so far this season, that we have talked about endlessly since that first series against the Astros. If you guys have been following the platform, you know very well that we've been beating this drum every single day, all week long. Because even when the Mets have had their big wins, very few of those big wins, the Mets even bat better than 250 to 300 runners in scoring position. They're usually falling in the 1 to 200 at best category of average runners in scoring position. They have countless nights of going 2 for 13, or, we're going to see there maybe once in a blue moon you get like a 4 for 11 or 4 for 12, but it just has not been happening. The Mets have been absolutely horrendous, and it's frustrating because you look at the numbers and you say to yourself, oh wow, they're getting on base at a great clip. That goes in hand as to why maybe the batting average doesn't tell the whole story. And that's true. When you get on base at a good clip every single inning for the most part, especially against certain teams where you're reading them well, it's going to stick out more like a sore thumb that you didn't drive in the runs because you were constantly making things happen. So on one hand, you're encouraged by the Mets' continued ability to get on base, but you're discouraged because you're not stepping up when they need you most. And that's where we now find the conversation that we have today. And that's why I want to hear from you, Mets fans. What do you think is the best configuration for Carlos Mendoza and this lineup? Because I know everyone and their mother is going to say, move Juan Soto down, move him out of the 2-hole. And not that I completely disagree with you guys, but simply I need to see it to believe it, because I have no reason to believe that Carlos Mendoza is going to drop Soto in the lineup until we see that happen. Because here's the thing. If you drop Soto in the lineup, you naturally push Alonso out of the top 3. And you need to keep Alonso in the top 3. Alonso batting third has been a huge saving grace to his offense so far this season. Having that guaranteed first inning at bat is a game changer. Think about the amount of wasted opportunities the Mets have had in the past where they didn't hit a lick in the first and Alonso didn't get that one final at bat he otherwise should have gone, where maybe everyone else is getting, say, 5 at-bats, but he ends up with just 4 because, again, he wasn't able to get that final turn there in the lineup. Now that he's batting 3, he's in there every single first inning. He's hopefully in there towards the end of the ball game as well. I love that for Alonso. I don't want the Mets to deviate really from the top 3. It's just been an absolute shame that Juan Soto has continued to not step up the way that we need him to right now. And really frustrating because it felt like that he was really going to start to officially get hot. And I remember saying that a couple weeks ago, and that only lasted 4 or 5 days. And then he really cooled off, not only with just getting on base because of walks, but more so just underwhelming strike 3 calls, not swinging enough, not having confidence, not having the shuffle, not having anything that makes Juan Soto Juan Soto. Where's the swagger? Where's the hot cockiness? Where is that shuffle shaking the ass? We got nothing right now. We got a Walmart Juan Soto when it comes to personality. I'm going to go on a limb and say this, and I said it in our post-game show last night too. Juan Soto has shown more personality in spring training with the Mets than he did so far this season. Remember when he had all that fun chopping up with the guys there in the dugout and on the field? Soto just looked like he was having a lot more loosey-goosey fun, comfortable fun, whereas this season, he's already feeling the pressure. And I get it. He's a $765 million man. He's making $100 million gross in year 1 of his contract. I had a lot of pressure on my shoulders, too, if I was in his position. But here's the thing. I'm not in his position. I'm just a schmuck that talks about the Mets for a living and talks about guys like him trying to do better about the game of baseball that they're currently doing. In the case of Soto, he's paid the big bucks for a reason. He knew the pressure was coming, so I expect him to step up. And when he doesn't step up, it's going to be underwhelming. It's going to frustrate fans. And the longer that continues, and the longer Juan Soto looks more of like just an above league average batter and not a generational talent, every Met fan, including myself, is going to find themselves frustrated and wondering, when is that true Juan Soto going to finally start to break out? When that does in fact happen, I expect the runners in scoring position production to follow along suit. But until then, everybody, we are kind of stuck in this purgatory right now as to having a good player but not a great player. And we need a great player for what we're paying him to be. That goes without saying. And thank you guys again for coming to my TED Talk. But all jokes aside, guys, let's get into our final topics of the day, which have to do on the Red Sox front and the prospect front. Let's start here briefly with the prospects, everybody, because we did see a lot of key notables, including our guy in Mauricio have himself a day. But let's start there and Lowe, everybody, because Lowe with the Port St. Lucie Mets, the key offensive notables in this one were much that we saw. Trey Snyder won 1 for 3 with 2 walks, and 2 walks here that we saw. Corey Collins, 1 for 2 with 3 walks and 2 RBIs. I think Trey had at least an RBI or 2 as well. Nothing else to really make note of there for a quick hitting prospect report. Then we get on to the Brooklyn Cyclones, and for Brooklyn, we saw their starter go 2 shutty, 4 strikeouts, more of a bullpen game. Matt Allen, that we saw, in fact, in his Brooklyn Cyclones debut, getting moved up from Port St. Lucie. He only won 0.2 innings, allowed no earned runs, but did throw 33 pitches. So again, an adjustment for Allen, who is clearly being ramped up right now by the Mets as potentially a reliever option more so than, say, a starter option. And it does make sense because the Mets are just hoping Allen can stay healthy and be effective at the major league level at some point, whether it's this year or not this year, obviously, but whether it's within next year or a couple years. They're just hoping that he can be a productive player and hit the major league level the way that he's hoping to. I mean, blossoms to be something greater than a reliever. Awesome, but naturally, he's a lot of work to do for a guy having his first pro season since he was drafted in 2019 due to all those injuries. Carson Bench, Mets first-round pick last year. I'm obsessed with this kid. He's had a fantastic season. He's batting right around 300 to north of 1,000 OPS, a 2 for 3 game with a home run, 4 RBIs and 2 walks. Fantastic. AJ Ewing has been stepping up big time, has skipped nothing whatsoever, going from Port St. Lucie to Brooklyn this year as he was moved up. He's batting 3 for 5 with a double and a stolen bag. We love that. Then let's get on to the Rumble Ponies, everybody, because the Rumble Ponies, they have Mr. Zach Thornton, their southpaw, have another sharp start. 5 innings, 2 earned runs, 6 strikeouts. JT Schwartz went 2 for 4 with 2 walks, 2 doubles, and an RBI. Love to see that. Nick Morabito, who I absolutely love too, Mets minor league player of the year last year, commanding the outfield. 3 for 5 with 2 stolen bags and a double. Jet Williams, who can also command the outfield, obviously in second base, had a big game as well. 3 for 5 with a double and an RBI, guys. Jet Williams is batting fantastic so far this year, and he's 5th in AA Eastern League with his 161 WRC+, meaning that he's 61% above league average as a batter there in AA. And defensively, he has had 23 starts at shortstop, 1 at second base, and 4 in center field. So he's been predominantly a shortstop so far this season. So my apologies if I just said second base and center field. It's been more shortstop and center field than anything else. And then Ryan Clifford, who is one of the biggest, hardest hitters in all the Mets minor leagues, who I'm a big fan of as well. A part of that Drew Gilbert trade from a couple years ago with Justin Verlander and the Astros. 2 for 3 game for him with a walk and an RBI. Setting the stage now for, yes, what we saw there in AAA. And we have very encouraging news on the front of Felipe De La Cruz, because many of you guys know that Felipe De La Cruz is a southpaw option that the Mets may consider as a call-up, potentially sometime as soon as within this next month. He skyrocketed from the Rumble Ponies there to the Syracuse that we did a player spotlight on the platform multiple times in the past. I love him a lot. The only reason why I don't have a special graphic for him today is because of the current setup that I'm utilizing. I'm waiting to get a plugin for my main computer right now, so I'm working with not as much things in hand as I typically do, so I apologize for that. But Felipe De La Cruz, big game for him that we saw in this one. 2 shutty, which was great to see because De La Cruz's last 2 outings weren't as sharp. Before that, he had a scoreless multi-inning outing as a reliever, and then before that, he made his Syracuse Mets debut a couple weeks ago and went 6 shutty with 9 strikeouts there. So whether he's a bulk reliever or a starter, the Mets love his makeup there with a simple fastball, slider mix especially, and De La Cruz, knowing that the Mets have such a lack of quality on the lefty front in their bullpen right now, could find himself skyrocketing sooner rather than later in that category to be a reliever option for the Mets as a southpaw. Because unlike Genesis Cabrera, and unlike even guys there and Jose Castillo is currently in the bullpen, what we've seen Felipe De La Cruz is a guy that touches the upper 90s on the gun there with the velo, and that has been a huge part of his early success this season after having a sub-2 ERA with an absurd 20 strikeouts to just 3 walks or so at the Rumble Pony level to ultimately warrant him to getting called up to Syracuse the past couple of weeks the way that he was. But he looked great. Jared Young, that we know in the minor leagues, looked good as well. 3 for 5 with 4 RBIs. He's been tearing the cover off the ball all year long. And Mauricio, with his best game so far in the minor leagues this year, the better than what he did there with the Rumble Ponies, better than what he did there with the Port St. Lucie Mets. Mauricio's first game with AAA Syracuse for the most part, 2 for 4 game with a stolen bag. Looking fantastic. And the best part of it all, everybody, is that we did in fact see Mauricio play 8 defensive innings there in the infield. So that is very encouraging signs to see. So love to see that from Ronnie. Hopefully that continues for him, because it's not a matter of if he will be at the major league level again. It's a matter of when. Whether it's this season or next season, we know that Mauricio has a lot of raw talent and a lot of raw potential. So I'm really curious to see how he continues to develop now healthy finally for the Syracuse Mets, and we go on from there. But guys, on the pitching end, just some notables to share, everybody. Ryan Lambert has been absolutely fantastic for the Rumble Ponies. We've talked about this already, but he's at a 1.13 ERA right now, and he just looked brilliant. That we saw 7 hits and 26 Ks and 16 innings pitched. Douglas Orlana, who my man, our pitching contributor on the platform, Isaac Rothman, loves, he had a 1.65 ERA with 23 strikeouts to a 4 walks in just 16.1 innings. And Dylan Ross, 1.32 ERA, 25 strikeouts, and 13.2 innings, and he has hit 1 or 2 on the gun. And just notables, all those guys were moved up this year already from their previous team with the Brooklyn Cyclones to the Rumble Ponies, because they've all been dominating thus far there at the minor league level. So love to see that, everybody. And now, last but not least, let's talk about this matchup beginning on tonight, because we're going to have the Red Sox and the New York Metropolitans. And something that I meant to share with you guys much earlier, I'm really bothered that I'm actually sharing this now, because it was kind of the point of why I did this video in part to get you guys set for tonight, but I will post it on the community tab as well, everybody. we are going to be live for our latest watch party this evening for you guys to check out between the Mets and the Red Sox. It's going to be an absolute blast. It'll be starting right around 6:30 p.m. Eastern, barring changes, so be on the lookout for it, folks. And all you'll need to do is to click the link down below in the description of this video, and I'll have it linked in the community tab on YouTube shortly after this video comes out as well. Head over to playback.tv/WardyNYM. You sign up for free. You don't have to spend a dime. There's nothing to do there. And you automatically make your account, and all you need is an MLB TV subscription. That's the important thing. If you have an MLB TV subscription, you link your subscription with playback.tv/WardyNYM, and you'll be able to join my room and actually watch the Mets game live in real time with your guy Wardy. That means as the GKR broadcast is actively going on, you can fix your audio levels if you want to listen to more of them than me, and then raise my volume when reactions happen, but I'll be sharing play-by-play, reactionary commentary as we always do. We do this every single week on the platform as we're partnered all year long here with our friends at Playback, so make sure to check it out. Because of the fact that we're playing the Red Sox, I am going to try to get my guy Robbie Hyde to join us as our special guest, so be on the lookout for that. Waiting for confirmation from Robbie right now, so I'm not going to guarantee it for you guys, but we did discuss it the past couple days, and I am hoping to see that come to fruition. So Robbie Hyde's a great friend of mine, major baseball YouTuber, right around 50,000 subscribers, and also does playback segments specifically for Red Sox games, as well as he has his own Red Sox podcast and post-game show that he does pretty much exactly what we do here for the Mets. He does for the Red Sox for the Monster Territory, which is out of Foul Territories Network for the Red Sox, and Robbie Hyde is his main YouTube channel. So be on the lookout for that later on today. Barring changes, everybody, but Game 1 begins tonight, and it's Kodai Senga and his absolutely gorgeous 1.02 ERA and 4-2 record facing off against the right-hander and Hunter Dobbins, who's been off to a solid start this year for the Red Sox with a 3.9 ERA across 6 games. Game 2 in this series, we have Clay Holmes toeing the rubber, and the Red Sox, it still has yet to be determined, so we'll see who they're going to announce on that front. But Game 3 is the big one, and this is the one that I'm most fearful of, mainly because Tyler McGill and his 3.74 ERA is going up against Garrett Crochet, the dominant southpaw in year 1 of a long-term deal there with the Boston Red Sox, and his 2 ERA. Garrett Crochet is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's one of my favorite pitchers to watch. Throws absolute gas, a dominant towering southpaw, and Tyler McGill has been really on the decline his past 3 starts. He has been a worse in each of his past 3 starts, unfortunately, and he's allowed at least 4 earned runs in each of his past 3 starts. So for a Red Sox team that's had the offense working, but has lost a lot of tight ball games this year, it's going to be curious to see how that matchup goes. For the Mets pitching, we need Kodai Senga to be the ace that he is. Game 2, we need Clay Holmes to obviously be better than the way he was against the Pirates, but it really isn't too much his fault. It was really bad weather. It was downpouring rain when he gave up one of the 2 home runs that he gave up. Just very unfortunate, but Holmes knows this Red Sox team well, and to a degree, they know him very well, but now as a starter. So I'm really intrigued to see how this matchup, this 3-game set, is going to unfold there in Fenway against those Red Sox, everybody. But what is one commonality that the Red Sox and the Mets have had this year? The Red Sox, mind you, a team that's 23-25, whereas the Mets are 29-18. The Red Sox have had a lot of offensive upside this season, even with the injuries of Tristan Casas and others. But their bugaboo has been losing a lot of tight ball games. The Red Sox have lost what feels like at least half their games this year, or close to, by just one measly run. The Mets have lost a good chunk of games this year as well on that front. So be on the lookout, everybody. But again, thank you again so much for watching for our latest Big Mets Update segment. That's what I have for you for a quick series preview, prospect report, and everything else happening in Metsland. So hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. Let me know all your key reactions and thoughts to the following video today. And I'll see you all again, barring changes, 6:30 p.m. Eastern for a Mets Red Sox watch party, live in the Playback app and live on YouTube. If I didn't say that already, it will be simulcast on YouTube, so don't worry. If you guys can chime into Playback, don't say you don't have an MLB TV subscription, no worries. But you will see a scoreboard, and that be it. The actual game that will be shown will be solely in the Playback app. So see you all later tonight for watch party and post game. Until then, have a great one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out.